Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing. Mr. Zelikow, you've had fascinating assignments working as counselor for Secretary of State Rice and serving as executive director of the 9/11 Commission. And I would like to ask you if you could amplify a little bit on what has been characterized as disclosures to leaders in Congress about interrogation techniques. I served on the Intelligence Committee of the Senate for 4 years and found myself constantly in a frustrating position of being told classified information and being warned not to breathe a word of it to the public at large for fear that it would endanger the lives of people who were helping the United States.
Or if I might add, Senator Durbin, our colleagues, in some cases our staff.
Yes. And so there were times when I frankly wanted to walk right out of the Senate Intelligence Committee room and call a press conference and say, if America only knew. Now, when I've said that on the floor before, people have said to me, I don't get it. Aren't you supposed to say what you believe is true no matter what? Well, I think you know better. You know that there are limits to sharing information, particularly when it might endanger someone's life. So when members of Congress were briefed of this, was it before the fact? Were they being asked to authorize these techniques and give their approval?
Sir, I think Senator Feinstein mentioned SSCI is apparently really trying to break down the chronology. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has been publicizing chronologies of briefings, which then need to be matched up against when we were actually doing things. And so the honest answer is I don't know whether folks were briefed before the fact. Formally, what's supposed to happen is a memorandum of notification is prepared that lets key members of Congress know that a program is being undertaken with the authorization of the President pursuant to some prior presidential finding. And therefore, members of Congress are being informed that pursuant to this finding, we're now doing certain things.
After the fact?
It could be after the fact. It should be at the time the program is initiated and before the program is implemented, so that it appears that you're taking the congressional consultation seriously, which the administration should.
And I recall only one instance where a member, in this case Senator Rockefeller, was briefed on the wiretap situation, and in his frustration, maybe desperation, hand wrote a letter to file about protesting this, which didn't surface until much later. But it was the only way that he could create tangible evidence of his displeasure or disapproval of what was happening. I raise this because I've spoken to Senator Rockefeller, and I know he was duty-bound by the law and by his conscience not to make disclosures of classified information, and yet felt that there was something here that was worthy of at least being on the record, as crude as his method was. I raise this because many people seem to be suggesting that if members of Congress at the highest level are informed, that they are somehow complicit. And I haven't seen that. I've seen specific limitations on that information when it's given to me in the Senate Intelligence Committee and by reference from leaders when they are briefed. Do you understand the difference here?
I think I do, and as I have listened to both sides of this argument, I step away from this with some concern. I will tell you, on the inside, when I was arguing, we were having heated arguments about these policies on the inside in the White House Situation Room, and the argument would often be deployed against me and my colleagues that, well, we briefed the following members of Congress, name, and they don't have a problem with it. So, in other words, these briefings are being used actually to deal with arguments on the inside of the administration, yet I hear what you're saying and what other members of Congress have said. And so I have to ask myself, does the Congress think that the oversight process that accompanies these programs is working to their satisfaction?
Well, the answer from me, after 4 years' experience on the Senate Intelligence Committee, it's not even close. Not even close. I mean, there were times when you wanted to express your disapproval, and there was no means to do it. If you were privy to the most important information, there was no means. I just have a few seconds left, if I might. I'd like to ask Mr. Zelikow his opinion on the notion of closing down the Guantanamo facility. Do you believe that is a good decision?
Yes, sir. In fact, Deputy Secretary of Defense Gordon England and I wrote a paper suggesting that the President announce his determination to close that facility in June 2005.
I am aware of one detainee represented by an attorney in Chicago who was advised by email after 6 years of incarceration. He was advised by email there were no charges against him, and this was 15 months ago, and that he could be released. He is still at Guantanamo. And it's an indication to me of a serious miscarriage of justice. And there are many now arguing to, I guess, maintain Guantanamo. I cannot imagine, after President Bush and President Obama have made these statements publicly and reached that same conclusion, that that is their position. But what do you think would be the consequence if we kept Guantanamo open at this point?
When I was on the inside, I would make the argument sometimes that Guantanamo has now become as much symbol as substance. I could ask people here, has anyone ever here heard of the Federal Correctional Institution at Marion?
I have.
Right.
State.
But everyone in America has heard of Alcatraz. One reason Alcatraz was closed was because it had become a symbol as much as a substance of a particular kind of facility. Then we basically created supermax facilities that were at least maybe just as tough as Alcatraz in some ways that no one has really heard of. And it doesn't become the same focal point of controversy in the same way. Guantanamo had become, in world public opinion, a toxic problem for the United States of America. And so we needed to address that as an issue in our foreign policy.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that if the decision is made that any of these prisoners from Guantanamo would be transferred to federal correctional institutions, that they could be held safely and securely?
Sir, we hold people who are far more dangerous in such institutions, including quite dangerous terrorists like Ramzi Youssef, who is currently residing in a supermax facility inside the United States now. I'll also add that when I've had the opportunity on behalf of one of the federal judges who've been working through the habeas petitions to be asked to examine classified files and provide expert advice on holding these folks. And one of the things that strikes me now and struck me then is we have a vast amount of experience in how to judge the continued incarceration of highly dangerous prisoners, since we do this with thousands of prisoners every month all over the United States, including some really quite dangerous people. We routinely make these decisions, and for better or worse, we've worked out a lot of ways of deciding how to make those calls. And I think that that's a whole body of knowledge that actually hasn't been tapped very well in making judgments about how long you can incapacitate a really pretty broad spectrum of people at Guantanamo, many of whom do not show large signs of future dangerousness.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Graham.
Mr. Zelikow, what's the recidivism rate regarding the people